Hi, I'm Amy Esther, and I live with multiple chronic illnesses, two of those being PCOS and endometriosis. PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I am a mother now to three young children, so I was able to have kids, which I think with these conditions can be very scary and unknown. But it wasn't the easiest journey, but I was able to have these kids, and although I still live with lots of health problems and challenges every day, they just make my whole world go around, and I love them so much. So with my endometriosis story, I didn't know anything about PCOS until I was probably 22 or 23, but I started having symptoms of both since I started puberty. I think I was around 15 years old. And from the beginning, I had very painful periods. They were enough that I didn't understand that it wasn't normal at first because everybody talked about having cramps and how awful periods were. And I remember being in school once in high school, and a friend of mine said, "I just started my period today, and I'm just having cramps today." And I was shocked that she was at school. That blew my mind because I didn't know that you could get out of bed if you were in that much pain. And I would typically be like curled up in a ball, crying. Um, I would go through a pad and a tampon in an hour. It was super heavy, super painful, and it it was impossible to do anything. I couldn't work. I couldn't go to school when I was on my period, especially the first 3 days. And I remember when I realized that wasn't normal, that's when I told my parents, I think I need to go to the doctor for this. And so I went to see an OBGYN. And of course, the first thing that they did was put me on birth control. And that actually made my periods worse. At the time, I didn't realize that they weren't normal length. I thought they were longer than they should have been. But they were so awful when they would come that I didn't realize that they weren't coming as often as they should, which is more of a symptom of the PCOS. Um, and so I had tried different birth controls. They didn't work for me. They made it worse. They made me depressed. So I decided to just live with it. They told me it's probably endometriosis, and you can get surgery for it, but we may as well wait till you're ready to have kids because it will just come back. So I just dealt with it, and I just knew that when my period started, I was out. I was they did give me muscle relaxers, which did was the only thing that really helped, but I would burn my skin with heat pads, and it was a really horrible experience. um, and when I started to get other symptoms of my other chronic illnesses, I have EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, as well as some autoimmune stuff. And I started to get these other symptoms, fatigue and aches. And so I thought maybe it's the endometriosis. We never actually got surgery for that. So I was married at the time. I was wanting to have kids soon if I wasn't so sick, but we did decide let's just get the surgery and see what happens. So I did end up getting the endometriosis surgery. I did have endometriosis, and they said they cleaned it up. It would probably come back. But at that time, I thought, well, maybe I'll start having kids now. We were still trying to figure out my other health stuff. Um, but after I had that surgery, I thought, okay, now my next period, I'm not going to have pain like I have been. And I was so excited. And then my period came, and I was in just as much pain, but instead of it being everywhere, it was in one spot. And so I went back to the doctor that day when I was in the pain, and he said that I had ruptured an ovarian cyst. And we don't know for sure, but what we had guessed is that I was probably rupturing cysts nearly every time I had a period. So I would have the endometriosis and rupture a cyst, because after I got that endometriosis surgery, I had a cyst rupture every single month until I was on clomid to get pregnant with my baby. So my doctor said he guessed that my body was trying to ovulate, and instead it would create a cyst and then it would rupture. So I had a hard time with some doctors as I went on this journey, and to officially get my diagnoses with the endometriosis, I felt like from the beginning, my doctor was it just acted like it wasn't a big deal. Like, oh, it's really common. A lot of women have this. You'll just get surgery before you have kids, and then you'll get the surgery, you'll have kids just fine. It's no big deal. And it was, I couldn't function with it. And so that was really frustrating. And I didn't know anyone else around, like any of my friends who were going through this and who understood. And if I tried to explain it to friends, they would just be like, oh, yeah, periods are the worst. And then I would see them functioning with their period. And it was really, really frustrating. But I kind of internalized it a lot and just thought, okay, I just need to push through until I have kids. And when I had that endometriosis surgery, I felt like that doctor, that OBGYN, was the one to finally, it was actually a man, and he, I felt like understood me better or listened to me better than the women doctors that I had before, interestingly enough, because he, I don't know, he hadn't experienced it or whatever, but he just seemed to understand me better. And when I had that endometriosis surgery, and I started having a cyst, that's when we started looking at PCOS as well. So that first ultrasound, when I ruptured that first cyst, he saw that I had polycystic ovaries. And we started to look at some of the symptoms and do some testing with like hormone testing, and found that I was having like testosterone and different things that were not where they should be. And I had struggled to lose weight my whole life. Like, I wasn't super overweight, but I was very active. I would eat super healthy, and I wouldn't change my weight. So that doctor, I felt like, was there to help me, and I stayed with him until years later when I got a hysterectomy, and he helped me through that whole journey. And I still to this day feel like I wouldn't have been taken seriously if it wasn't for him, because of the other doctors that I had seen. And I didn't fit the exact PCOS criteria. It wasn't like the book, but I didn't have hair growth and some of the other symptoms, but I knew that it wasn't normal, and what I was experiencing wasn't normal. So I'm really grateful. I think it makes a huge difference to have a doctor who not only understands these conditions, but it listens to what you're saying and the problems that you're having. And my current OBGYN, who I saw with all my babies, I never felt like he pushed me into anything. He would tell me, here's what the research says, here's what I typically see, but then he would listen to me. And another thing that I really loved about this doctor is I always had a lot of questions, because not only did I have the PCOS and endometriosis, but I had autonomic nervous system issues, and I have a lot of pain and a lot of issues in my muscles and migraines and all of those things. So the pain that I experienced with my endometriosis and PCOS, I haven't had a period in years, actually, because I had a hysterectomy and I had babies, and I didn't have periods while I nursed my babies. So I have a few vivid memories of my worst periods. One was when I was on a birth control that made you only have a period every 3 months. And that was one of my worst periods I've ever had. And yeah, typically I was curled up in a ball crying. I would get in the tub. I would turn the water as hot as it could go, and I would lay in the tub with that heat. That would help, having heat. And then I would wrap a super hot heating pad around my belly, and I would feel it really all the way around my abdomen. Like the worst was a little bit lower, and it just felt like someone was stabbing me in all the places. And even when I got my endometriosis removed, I mean, it comes back, but taken care of in my surgery the first time before it started coming back, and I was having the ovarian cyst pain, it was a similar pain, but it was just like a stab in one spot. And I mean, I have had babies now, and It was as bad as labor pains for me. I remember, like, everyone said, like, that labor was just so much worse. It's like cramps, but way worse. No, I could take a labor pain over my period pains. They were so bad. So my experience with my surgery to get my endometriosis, I got that done, I think only one time because I had my babies um, a year after that. I've had other surgeries, but that one was my first big surgery that I remember. And what I would say is make sure that you're clear with your doctor, like if you're having symptoms and you're not ready to have kids yet or whatever, like I felt like I had to wait until I was ready to have kids. And at this time I got it for a different reason, which I'll get into, but I just want to say that you advocate for yourself. If you're like, I can't deal with this pain, I know it's going to come back. I'm willing to get it done twice or three times, whatever, but you need some relief of pain. I would recommend getting it. I wish I would have got it years before, even if it had come back, because of the relief that it brought. I still had, other things, but the relief of that endometriosis pain had lightened so much. And when I got the surgery, I wasn't really nervous about it just because I was having a lot of gut issues. I was having a lot of other symptoms. And I just thought, you know what? I know I have this. I'm like 99% sure that I have this condition. They can't officially diagnose you until they actually see it in the surgery. But at least that's how it was then. I don't know if anything has changed, if they can see it in other ways. But I knew I had it just because I knew it wasn't normal. And so I was excited to get it. I was, married and wanting to have kids soon. And so I felt really good about getting it. And I went in, got the surgery, and I was thinking the pain of the surgery would be the most painful part or the worst part. And it was actually the my shoulders that hurt. So what they did is they filled me up with air so that they could see everything, and then the air has to escape after the surgery's over. I did get a laparoscopic surgery, so it was just like some small incisions. I think there's one here and maybe a couple other places, but it seemed like such a small areas that were cut open, but the pain from the air having to escape, I don't know what it's called, but that hurt so bad. And I had just had surgery, and I remember them telling me, you have to walk around to help the air escape better. If you lay down, it will just get trapped and hurt more. And every time I laid down, it was so painful. I would have to get up and walk around. I remember walking around our apartment with my husband helping me for hours after the surgery because that pain was so bad. But it really wasn't a lot of recovery besides that. And that was like 24 hours. And then once that air has made its way out, the post-op, it was not bad at all. And again, that's why I'm like, I would have got it earlier. I would have got it multiple times if I would have known, or would have like been a little more assertive and stood up for myself instead of just how I was when I was a teenager, which was a doctor said, nope, you don't want to get this yet. And then I was like, okay, I'll just suffer alone. So after the surgery, I had spoke with my doctor. He told me how severe my endometriosis was. I honestly don't remember. I should have kept the documents, but it wasn't super mild, but it wasn't like the worst he'd ever seen either. And so he had told me that. He had told me at that time actually that I also had a couple cysts that they removed that were growing on my ovaries. And so they removed those while they were in there. And I remember that was the first time I'd ever heard of the ovarian cyst thing. And those they could see when they would rupture. I would be able to see them on an ultrasound. So they would do ultrasounds later. But for the endometriosis, they really could just see while they were in there, tell me this is how bad it was. It's going to come back. And I was so excited for my first period. And like I mentioned before, then I had my first period and ended up having a lot of pain. But had I not had that surgery, I wouldn't have known about the PCOS because we never would have checked there. I just thought that the pain I was having was all from the endometriosis, and all my other PCOS symptoms were just being a girl and it was normal. I didn't realize that it was abnormal. But after I was able to get my PCOS under control, my periods did lighten up a lot. I was able to get pregnant. It was about let's see, I got pregnant about 4 months after the surgery, and then I unfortunately had a miscarriage, and my next pregnancy was probably 8 months later when I got pregnant with my daughter after a couple rounds of clomid, which is an ovulation drug that they use for PCOS. Um, and then I had a few periods between that and my son's pregnancy and another miscarriage in there. But I did notice that each period that I did have got much worse. And I think if I were to have had more kids, I had some other issues in there that I did have to get a hysterectomy due to another condition I have. I had severe uterine prolapse after it was pretty bad after my second kid. They told me, we think you can have one more baby. And so I was able to have one more, had a hysterectomy 6 weeks after my third baby because of that. But can I just tell you that it was a blessing because I didn't have to deal with the endometriosis anymore. And so that's one of my pains that is now gone. And I know some people do get a hysterectomy for endometriosis. And I'd considered asking about that anyway. But since I had this other condition, they ended up doing that. And I was very, very blessed to be able to have my 3 children. Uterine prolapse is essentially when your uterus is falling out. I was having pain down there, and I didn't think anything of it because I'd had a baby. And then I went to the doctor to see if I could have another baby with all of my health issues. And when he was testing everything, he said, one thing we do need to know is you do have uterine prolapse. I was 26 years old, and they said it's normal when you're 50, 60, or you've had a ton of babies or something, but typically you don't have it at this young. And I found out later that I have a connective tissue disorder called EDS, which makes my ligaments and all the things kind of looser. And so I ended up having bladder, bowel, and uterine prolapse. So all of them were collapsing. Obviously, my bladder and bowel, I still need those. And so while they did my hysterectomy, they put a sling in for my bladder, and they did a bunch of repair in there. So I had a crazy surgery with a 6-week-old baby, and it was probably, my husband and I have said, it was the hardest few months of our entire lives. But now it was very worth it because now I don't have my endometriosis pain and the PCOS symptoms and all of that. I do want to add that after I had my first baby, I swear on my life, my PCOS went away. My doctor said my ovaries were still polycystic. We didn't do any of the lab work, but I got pregnant quickly. I started to lose weight. I mean, after having my babies, I weighed less than before I had my first baby without trying. I didn't have those extra symptoms. So even though technically I still had polycystic ovaries, I swear on my life, something happened with my hormones and my body got pregnant easy. So I don't have any endometriosis pain anymore. I actually kept my ovaries. My doctor said we could take your ovaries too. But I decided to keep them because I felt like my hormones had balanced. And he said, if the PCOS comes back, we could go back in and take those if we needed to. But I felt like my body had gone through a lot. And I guess here's my advice for anybody who is suffering from these conditions we talked about today or anything else. It's like, if you're having other symptoms that maybe don't fit into that category, like I was still having the cyst rupts, even though I had my endometriosis surgery, like there could be something going along with it. And I think oftentimes, like for me, I was just pushed off of like, it's just you just have this extra symptom, or like I'd say, like, "I'm so fatigued, I can't get up," and they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I'm tired too." And, like, no, there's a difference. I'm not just tired. I'm not just this tired mom. Like, I literally, like, cannot function normally. I can't take my kids to the park without crashing for 4 days after. Like, this is not normal. And if you're seeing something that's not normal, like, keep pushing and keep advocating for yourself, because that's something that took me so many years to figure out and to know what to do. And just because somebody, a doctor or a specialist or someone who seems to know it all, says you should do something, if it doesn't feel right to you, don't do it. When I didn't feel right about doing birth control, I'm so glad that that was the one place that I did stand up for myself and say, no, I don't like the way I feel on this. I don't like the hormone disruption. I'm going to find a different way to deal with this. And so that's what I had to do. And even though some people didn't believe me, and I'm still on this journey, sometimes people don't believe me and will think that I'm not actually as sick as I say I am, or I'm just trying to get out of stuff or whatever. I can only stand up for myself. And when I find other people who understand what it's like, it definitely helps to talk to them, as well as just being able to stand up for myself and what I need.